Thank you all. That was some good information, so we really appreciate it. I'm now going to open the floor to questions. Does anyone have, all right, let's start here.
Hi. I'm a librarian, and my name is Gail Clement. I know Keith a little bit.
Thank you.
Hi. One of the things that we're feeling as supporters of authors on our campuses, because we don't have skin in the game either, we're not publishers, so we have a lot in common in terms of our vision for supporting authors and providing author services. But one of the missing links that wasn't covered today, but might be something Rubric offers, is like a Zagat's for the author experience. So that as authors go through a publication or submissions experience with the journal, they can rate it.
Yeah.
Because I think what's missing, is, particularly in the OA sector, but not necessarily, is people are really having a hard time finding how they don't know how to distinguish what's reputable or what is predatory, or those are not helpful words necessarily. But this idea of actually having a rating system for the author experience. And I know publishers themselves do surveys of their own authors, but that stays proprietary. So we've been craving a way that authors can find out what other authors' experiences are with journal. Is that a service that you looked at?
Is this on? Yeah. Thank you, Gail. It's a good question. I didn't touch on it, but that's part of Journal Guide, actually. So Journal Guide is it is a lot of the publisher coming in and claiming the profile and updating information that's there, but there's also a component of the community, the researchers coming in and providing information about journals as well. So things like time are really important. The experience, like how difficult was it to go through the process, how arduous is the submission guidelines for a particular journal. So really it's about time and cost and advising other researchers as well.
Yeah,
it is a component.
I think it's that independent piece that could really help with the predatory problem, where we just don't know if there's good intention behind the publication to begin with.
It's a big concern. I mean, we've been to a few meetings lately, and it seems to be an ongoing topic. And it's at the time where we have to be more transparent about the industry. The industry is moving to a service industry, and authors are the customers. I think that's the direction it's going. And it may not be paying. It doesn't have to be an open access journal, but I think more and more you see publishers looking at authors as their customers. And how can we provide good information to customers? And so that is, what we're looking at with Journal Guide. And I think because we're not a publisher, we can take a good shot at it at least. We're going to try.
I just wanted to add to that as well, that it's important, especially if you're supporting authors from multiple disciplines, to let them know that they should be expecting something different from a medical journal than from, a different journal that has, a different focus and might not require the same standards. I mean, just being able to say it was easy to submit to this journal but not to that journal, that could very well be just because of the nature of the research that was being done. So,
yes, right here.
I have a question about rubric. With kind of trying to assert that the peer review is of high quality, and especially if you're going to have a stamp of approval type thing, what is your process then if you provide that and the authors pay for that review? Well, the journal pays for the review, let's say, and then later, say the paper gets published but it's found to be fraudulent or something. How do you then handle that stamp of approval?
Yeah, I mean, we haven't had that situation yet, but we see that even with Nature. There may be retractions within Nature. I don't necessarily think the peer review is I mean, peer review can only do so much also. So if we have 3 well-matched reviewers looking at a paper, they're doing the standard review, they're going through, it doesn't mean that it's going to be, a paper that can never get retracted for some reason down the future. I don't think that's what the service is. The service is trying to replicate what happens within a journal right now. So what we can guarantee is there'll be 3 well-matched reviewers, and they're going to take a really good look at the paper. It's all transparent up there. You'll know the identities of them all. I think what we're offering is real peer review and a quality experience in a very short amount of time. The speed is what we try to differentiate on, not necessarily a higher level review that you would have in the journal, but it's the structure of the review and it's the speed.
Adam?
I'm at the managing director for review evaluation. Question for Keith. I've known you for so long, and I've known Dr. Rubric for so long, I'm a little embarrassed I don't know the answer to this. How do you recruit reviewers, and how do you match your reviewers with the papers?
I think at this point we have about 1,500 reviewers in our database that have gone through the training. That's not much. Like, that is a very small amount. So most of the reviewer recruiting is done on the fly. So a paper comes in, we have a team of people that are out there reaching out and trying to find those reviewers that are well matched to the paper. So we have a team that does it the hard way. Well, once they're in the model, they've gone through the training, they know what the rubric scorecard is, it's easier. So we look internally first if there's a well-matched reviewer, but we're still so early in this process, most of the time they're not in our database yet.
Let's go over here.
Anna, I appreciated all the stuff that you mentioned about having to be careful about file characteristics for double-blind review. Long ago, I was associated with a journal that actually did one of these experiments where we sent out every other paper double-blind versus single-blind. And one of the biggest problems was that authors had perhaps inadvertently would include sentences deep in the paper that said something like, in previous work we have shown, and that's the kind of thing, I mean, it's easy to strip out the byline, and I think it's relatively easy, although not for me, but for you, to modify the file characteristics in Microsoft or Adobe. But how, when you're training people to look for giveaways to author identities, do you actually get that deep? I mean, we couldn't find a good way to do it.
Yeah, no, I would agree with that. I think in general, people who have published extensively on this similar topic very much want to include references to their own work. And because of that certainly can become an issue for sure. I unfortunately, no, there is no good way. I would say humans are your best defense, but the truth is that they also might not read it at the same level or remember what they were looking for that deep into the paper. So, so I would say it's worth noting if it's a concern to your editorial board to have that kind of double blind. But I hesitate to say that type of effort, going that extra mile to try and take even those sentences out as well, is going to be a good use of your editorial office time, especially when you consider you can't control what they Google,
Right.
So.
And I will also add a comment that in the course of this experiment, with double-blind reviewed papers, we sent out a questionnaire asking the authors, reviewers, if they thought they knew who the authors were. And I can't remember the percentage of reviewers who didn't think they knew who the authors were, but I do remember that of those who knew who the authors were, 1/3 were wrong.
Yeah.
So we also asked them, okay,
Yeah.
who is the author? And so I don't know. I don't know how to interpret that. But I will say that the study was undertaken because of the perceptions of bias, but that the study actually showed the only significant result was that double-blind refereeing is really, really bad for non-native speakers of English. Because if the reviewers think that this is just a lazy person who has written a sloppy paper, they will absolutely take it out on the paper and the paper will be rejected. Whereas if, because of either the affiliation or the author's name, the reviewers suspect that this may be someone who has a little difficulty with English, but there might be some good science in there, they will take the time to actually figure out what that science is. So as you may have guessed, I'm not a big fan of double blind.
Yeah, and I think that there is something in reviewer instructions that should indicate you are not intended to be a copy editor, so please use your resources accordingly. But it's difficult to do, I know, when you've been editing, so.
What's your rejection rate?
Question was, what's your rejection rate?
We don't have a rejection rate. There's no decision at the end of our process. We're not a journal.
Okay, so.
I know, it's hard to wrap your head around, isn't it?
Something that you've got to get some bad papers, so I guess it's just a matter of some people get a 1.
Yes.
Okay.
Many people get pretty low scores, actually. Yeah. You're paying for the review, you're not paying for a good score. And that's the key to the integrity of the rubric brand itself, so.
This is a question for Keith. I'm Ellen Crockett, Publications Manager of Material Research Society.
Okay.
I manage 2 journals that are new and establishing a foothold in the field. One established journal that is trying to build back the dividend era. We're trying, at least 2 of those journals are trying to punch above the weight class. We're all looking for the best research
Yeah.
we can get. So my question is, in terms of your journal recommendations, my concern would be that my journals may not be pitching me to
Yeah.
the research I really want to attract to my journals. Now,
Yeah, that's a really good question, actually. And we've thought about what tools can we provide journals and editors to come on to Journal Guide and say, here's what we're looking for. This is maybe it's a new journal. I mean, maybe there's an editor-in-chief area there, or news and updates area that you can broadcast out, and people could follow your journal. So if something changes, they could be updated, or they could follow your society and get updates that way through any changes that are happening. So you launch a new journal, well, now the people that are interested in following your journal program would get an alert about that. So it's not just a static, this is the mission, right? It's not just a static page that you see right now. It's actually some engagement and some interaction in a way for a journal to push information to their community through the system. I don't know if that answers your question, but that's the idea, is that you could actually communicate through Journal Guide these kinds of things. We launched a new journal, we're doing something new, we're looking for these kinds of papers. We're a new journal, but here's what we're looking for.
Hi, I'm Brian Paul from Allen Press, and this question may gear more towards Anna, but certainly the experts of the call on the panel please respond if you want to. When I think of the open review, and of course single review and double peer review, more as a trend question for the 3 of you, what do you see people gravitating more to? When I have talks with editorial teams and those type of things, it's very controversial. Sometimes can even get very heated among the people that are trying to make this decision to either have an open peer review or a blind peer review. So with the experts at the panel, do you see a trend moving more towards the open peer review or staying more towards the blind peer review?
Sure. So I would say, in the experience of the customers that I have worked with, whenever editors on the editorial board or publishers have suggested, should we go to an open peer review process from one that has historically been blind in any way, the answer that I encourage the editorial office to make sure and push back and remind people of is, going to open peer review does not save you time or money. You're going to be publishing more information online, and you're going to have to make decisions about whether or not that should be copy edited, or whether or not changing your process is going to cause upheaval in your editorial office or with your reviewers. So don't do it on a whim. We have more new journals that are startup journals who are doing open peer review, and frequently we have people say, we'd like to do the same process as journal XYZ that we know works with you. And then when you tell them what that journal is actually doing, they don't really want to do that. So, so I think it's a bit of an education process. From our standpoint, we're fine with whichever way you choose, to do review, but in general, it's mainly been newer journals that are moving to open peer review or who have an incoming editorial, new editor or new editorial office staff and are going to go through change anyway and change to the workflow rather than just, the current editors who've decided to try and make their next year as crazy as possible. So.
Yeah, I would answer it more from a kind of an ethical, personal standpoint, and I would say that there's a global movement towards more transparency of information and data, and so I understand that more journals are emerging that follow this model because of that trend. I would echo that there is some negotiation to be had. So, for example, with CMAJ and CMAJ Open, we have a system where papers that are submitted to CMAJ that may not be suitable for CMAJ, but the science is okay, will go through a portal to CMAJ Open, and their reviews may be on it in that process. But there does become a difficulty where you then have to ask reviewers who've agreed to review under a single blind peer review system to allow their reviews to be published on the web after acceptance. And in the very odd occasion we've had reviewers say no, and you have to honor the first promise that was made. So it isn't a perfect system for the second journal. It does take a bit of re-education, and I know when the BMJ changed from single blind to open peer review, there were a few reviewers kind of ended their affiliation with BMJ because they didn't want to be open peer reviewers.
Any other, yes, right back here?
Regarding rubrics. In terms of trying to evaluate where amendments can show, I find it difficult to understand how you go through and do that. For example, you have significant impact back in the journal. Maybe this is an average paper, so you send it to a below average journal, perhaps. But there are so many subtleties in terms of the specific focus of one journal versus another. There's a lot of information that would have to be put in. Our editors, for example, take a lot of pride in helping rejected papers find a home at a more appropriate journal. They've got a lot of expertise. That's how they spend most of their waking hours thinking about journal articles. They can help guide people. I don't know how a computer program can do that unless it's designed by high-level academics in my field.
Yeah.
And that's not social sciences.
Yeah.
How would you do that?
Yeah, sorry. It's a really good question, and we struggle with that. I think we don't have enough data to make a really strong match. I mean, we try to point people in the general direction. We give them a pretty long list of journals at the moment, but we try to go off of a rough idea of acceptance percentage and R-score initially, and we try to do a match as well. So within AJ, we did a journal recommendation source for years, and our company, it's mostly PhDs, to be honest with you. So we have a lot of different PhDs in a lot of fields. So we do have expertise in-house, and it's a human process still to do the journal recommendation within rubric. I think to do a really good rubric to journal guide match is going to take a lot of time and information. And honestly, we need journals to come in and tell us what they're looking for as well. It's a really good point. There's no easy answer there.
I have a question for you too. Sometimes our reviewers or our editors, writing the decision letters, would apologize for being unable to publish your paper at this time and say, however, your paper may be more appropriate for, and sometimes they just say for a more specialized journal, but sometimes they actually name other journals that are not published by us. And we found that sometimes those other journals really didn't appreciate hearing from the author that, the Ecological Society said that my paper might be appropriate for your journal. Did you ever get pushback like that?
I haven't heard that. I wouldn't be surprised if we didn't get, well, you were recommended by Research Square. I have not heard that yet, but you never know. I mean, maybe we're doing an okay job then. We're not pointing
all
out.
I know is we had to tell our staff to try to edit those out.
That's a good point. Yeah.
Any other questions? No? You guys came up with some good ones. I didn't even have to come up with the moderator's questions. That's good. All right, well, then I guess that concludes our session. Thank you all very much for joining us, and thank you to our speakers.